Okay, Nicole, I'm excited to talk about your job, your corporate legal counsel. I would just love to know how you started. How did you get into law?
Okay, yeah, you bet. And thanks for having me. Glad to be here. So I started out graduated in print journalism. And just really loved that. Did a lot of research and writing on deadline and analysis. And my husband was going back to grad school and I thought, hey, I want to do something graduate level. And so I thought, I had heard that lawyers did a lot of research and writing and fact gathering and analysis. And so that's kind of how I got into the law. I just thought the skills that I had through getting a bachelor's in print journalism and working at newspapers would translate really well to the law and legal analysis and pay a lot better, frankly, than like newspapers did, unfortunately. So I went to law school and then graduated in 2004. And, in that time, since I graduated, I've clerked for a few judges, which basically means that you are their kind of like a research assistant. So you research for them, draft opinions, draft like questions for them to ask during oral argument, things like that. So really enjoyed that. That was fantastic. And then went and worked at a private law firm, big law firm here in Salt Lake City, did that for 10 years. And then got to the point where it was like, I kind of want a shift from the billable hour life, that you kind of measure your life in 6-minute increments so you can bill it to somebody. And I just wanted something different. So went in-house, first at a property management company and then to my current job. And I've been doing in-house corporate legal counsel for, it's been about 7 years now.
Are you specialized in something?
Yeah. So when I practiced at the firm, I did a lot of labor and employment law. And that means basically really just helping. I was usually on the employer side, did a few employee side cases, but really helping employers stay compliant with wage and hour laws, non-discrimination laws, helping them deal with allegations and training around like sexual harassment and that whole labor relationship or the whole employee-employer relationship. And then also got a little bit into union negotiation and collective bargaining agreements and things like that. So I still do quite a bit of that at my current job, really just advising the company on policies and procedures and complaints. Really, people think it's the dark side, but really I look at it as you are trying to make a culture that's really positive for your employees so you stay out of trouble, so you really try to set the bar really high and just create a place where people want to come to work and have a good feeling and have a good culture where we focus a lot on diversity and inclusion, hiring people of all different types and realizing that helps us actually perform better. That helps drive exceptional performance rather than just having everyone who thinks alike and has the same background. So that's a big chunk of the job. And then a lot of it's corporate law. So it is, we do a lot of like corporate governance stuff, like minutes and just governing the corporations, making sure we have the right governing structure in place, bylaws, things like that. And then it's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So like when we want to merge with a company or acquire a company, it's doing the diligence to make sure it's a good fit for our company, and then also doing the actual like transaction documents, and then the hard part comes when you have to merge the two companies together and get everything transitioned over to like our system. So that's really, I would say,
Having their people talk to your people.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you guys are our employees now. We've got to get you on our payroll and get you, all incorporated into the company. So,
do you work on a big team?
So the legal team at my current company is about 4 people, 4 attorneys and a paralegal. I actually have been working with a different team, kind of focusing on business strategy lately. Because one thing I found out about a law degree is that a lot of people don't realize is that if you can learn analytical skills and good reasoning skills and good judgment skills, like in law school or whatever, which is basically what they're training you to do, is to be a good critical thinker and a good analyzer. then you can really succeed in almost anything. And companies really want those skills of analysis and critical thinking and strategy and problem solving, because one thing I learned about the business is it's a new problem every day, or 10 new problems every day. And they just really need good people to kind of think through problems and solve them. And if they can't solve them, bring in the right people who can, you know.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't work with the core legal team, but I work with um, a lot of the business leaders in strategy my area is called integrated business planning right now. So it's a lot of like integrating the various parts of the business, like the manufacturing side with the sales and distribution side, with the logistics and trucking side. So it's kind of integrating all those different pieces of it.
Okay.
It's been
Yeah.
really
And it sounds like, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a law background because it's going to teach you all these other skills. You can
yeah.
do different things. You can have your hand in a lot of different pots.
I was going to say that's exactly it. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's I talked about the critical thinking skills, but I think it's also the writing skills are huge. Like if you know how to write and express things well on paper, which you really learn to do as a lawyer, writing all those papers in law school and
Well,
writing all
even
those
in your
essays.
undergrad,
Yeah,
right?
right. Exactly. So that's just another skill I would just encourage people to develop, is the writing skills, because they're really important.
What's like the most challenging part of your job?
I think about it like this sometimes, is how, lawyers and other people in kind of high demand professions, you take it all in, right? There's just like one problem after another. And when you work in human resources, it's a lot of like just trauma that you're taking in, trauma that, an employee's experienced, or just a situation that personalities are clashing and you can't make it work. And so you take in a lot of those problems and trauma. And I think that you've got to have good, and I'm not great at this, but like good outlets and self-care skills, because otherwise it can get to be like you're up to your eyeballs and just like problems and trauma and hard situations and really difficult stories or things that people are going through, and it just can get to be overwhelming, where you're like, I don't know if I can go back today and deal with any more trauma. So you just have to really, that's probably the least favorite part of the job, is all the problems. And then, like we were just talking about before we went live, I guess, is, having good outlets, like taking walks and getting out in nature and taking time for yourself and spending time with your family and your pets and all that good stuff. So it's
I think
just,
I think it's common, honestly, in all jobs,
yes,
even in your personal life, to set boundaries.
it is that kind of job where you could devote every waking hour to it. There's enough things to think about and look into and analyze and, troubleshoot, that you really could, like every waking hour, you could be working on something.
Mhm.
But you, like you said, you have to draw those boundaries and be like, okay, these hours I'm focusing on myself, and these hours I'm focusing on my family, and I just need a mental break from things, and I'm going to take at least 1 or 2 days a week and not think about it, and go off and get refreshed and come back and be ready to work again. So
Well, especially because you're a mom.
it's a good point, and I think that's a constant conversation in the legal profession. It kind of was, when I first joined the legal profession, it was kind of like the older generation of women was kind of like, oh, suck it up, we all did it, we're fine, our kids are grown and they're fine. But I think the younger lawyers that were coming up in the system, and not just women, men too, were dads too, were like, well, not, they don't have to be dads, just younger generations wanted to have those boundaries and wanted to be able to say, I'm not going to work till midnight every night. So it's a really good thing. And my husband's great, his job's really flexible, so he helps an immense amount. But really it is, I mean, I remember like my kids were just tiny, they're I have 2 teenagers now and then an 8-year-old. But when my girls were little, like 2 and 4, it was a struggle. It was because you come home just exhausted, and they didn't want to play and see you and
Right.
all that. And it was just really hard. But I do think, the legal profession, along with lots of other professions, is getting more flexible. And I think COVID, a silver lining of COVID is that every employer has to be more flexible, because people are demanding it and realizing that they can do just as good a job working a
Right.
flexible scheduler from home. So
Employees are getting a little bit more power, right?
I view as a good market correction, to be honest with you. I mean, for a long time, it was just kind of like do what your employer says and
Right.
they'll pay you what they pay you. And, this is kind of, I represent employers, but I kind of have this like progressive employee mindset. But, I just think it's a really good like market correction where employers are starting to value their people a little bit more. So
I feel like you dedicate so much time to your work. What's the most rewarding part of it?
I would say, when you kind of realize that something that used to really scare you or give you anxiety, you just kind of keep persisting at it and persisting at it. And then you realize it's not as scary and that you kind of have done it enough that you feel like you're a little bit better at it than you were. Like, excuse me, I would just point to like public speaking where I used to be terrified to speak in public, like to the point where I go to like school and law school classes and I'm like, oh, please don't call me. Just have this like severe anxiety about whether I was going to get called on and have to speak in front of just a class, a room of my peers. And so that's one thing, about being a lawyer is you really get called on to speak, whether it's in court, you're practicing law, if you're at a hearing or giving a presentation or, just standing up and teaching a class, or there's just a variety of opportunities, or just being in like a meeting where someone calls on you to speak, in a board meeting or in front of the executives or whatever. So, um, just over time, I realized that that got a little bit easier. And like one time I went to a hearing, this is back when I was practicing at the law firm, and like kind of just really got into the groove of like just answering the questions and kind of debating with the judge, not debating, but you know what I mean, just trying really engaging with the judge and opposing counsel. And it like the time went so fast and I got done with it and I'm like, that was actually kind of fun. I kind of enjoyed that experience where in previous years it would be like terrifying to even think about doing something. Yeah. So yeah.
Developing skills. And what
Yes.
what about some of your own personality traits that you've already had or some skills that you feel like, I mean, we talked about writing, but are there like personality traits that you feel like, oh, I'm so glad I'm this way. It benefits me. My parents think I'm bossy.
Yeah. Bossy is just another word for leadership, I think, right?
I should write that down.
Yes. Bossy girls are leaders or bossy boys are leaders. That's right. So, um, yeah, I don't try to think. I've always really enjoyed just reading and writing and analyzing. Like I just like ever since I was little, I would just love to like just sit and curl up with a book and just read, And so I think that lent itself well to just being able to just like read for long hours. um, but yeah, I never like I think I'm like my happiest days as a lawyer when I can just like go in my office and read and write and analyze and write briefs and write memos. And I mean, some people would find that like horrific for a day, but I just really enjoy that part of it. I think I'm a little bit introverted, which maybe isn't like a trait that a lawyer you'd usually think of as having, but I think it more and more people are recognizing along the lines of diversity and inclusion that it takes all types, right? It takes your extroverts who love to stand up in court and just really talk and be charming and tell a story, and then it takes people who love to write and research and use the various skills of your team to just bring out the best of everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you feel like certain personality traits do affect the type of law you end up practicing? Do you notice that certain people are really dominating and so they tend to do that kind of law or this, or do you notice stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. Like I can think of like a handful of my really extroverted classmates who just really love to talk and get to know people and network. And a lot of them have their own firms now because they decided, hey, I'm just going to go do this for myself. And they've done great. They've gotten a lot of business because they like to go to all those events and meet people. And, it's just like they get a lot of energy from that, second nature to them. So yeah. And then of course, like, the kind of really chatty, talkative people, you can see a lot of them became like trial lawyers because they're always in court and always telling a story to a jury or a judge or whatever. And then there's, like people like me and the people who are maybe even more introverted than I am that like really just love to like dig into the tax code. That's not me. Those are those other like more introverted people, but like read
You're
statutes
a
and
little balanced, right?
I'm a little more balanced, but yeah, like people who just like to sit and dig into the arguments and craft legal briefs and stuff like that. The kind of the more like quiet yet bookwormy types, I guess. So yeah, I think the law is broad enough that it can encompass a huge range of skills. You don't have to be like the type A dominant personality. I think there's room for a lot of different folks. Yeah.
Which I think is nice to talk about and bring up because I think there's a lot of careers, especially when you're young, that you
Mhm.
think, oh, I have to be like type A or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember I've talked to a lot of people in school and we took these personality tests and then took like what could our potential jobs be? And I'm like, I couldn't fit that. Then the more I've talked to people that
Mhm.
your personality can fit into all of these jobs.
Yes.
And it depends on where you work and what you're actually doing. That you don't have to be a
Yeah.
certain type.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. I don't think anyone has to be any certain type to be successful. I think we've done a lot of I keep mentioning this, but we've done a lot of diversity and inclusion training at my company because we struggle with that frankly. We're always trying to get more women, more racial minorities, more members of the LGBTQ community into our business just because it's been so uniform in the past. And um what we're finding is that along with that diversity, there's different leadership styles, there's different personality styles coming into the business. And, our bias toward that type A or that dominant leader type of personality is just that. It's just a bias. It doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't necessarily follow that you are dominant, therefore you're a leader. There can be all sorts of leaders. And by leader, I mean anyone who has the ability to influence anybody else. So, I've taken those sorry, personality tests too, and I'm always like, I don't know, I'm a little skeptical of them because I'm like, you can be you know, you can kind of depending on who you're around and what you're doing and what you're interacting with, you can, your personality can change a little bit. And I don't like the idea of being pigeonholed necessarily. But
So
yeah.
true. And then, I mean, I've taken those tests and then I view myself one way. And then I ask my
Yes.
family what they would answer for me, and they're like, that's not it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
What would your advice be for someone who's looking for a career, or what would you say to your younger self, even like when you were starting? And
Yeah. I always tell my girls that they have to have a master's degree before they get married. But that's a joke. I don't think I could enforce that very well. I don't do a contract or anything. But no, I just think that no matter what you do, I just think it's so important to go for something. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be college necessarily. It can be anything, but to have kind of a vision for yourself and go for it and recognize that things change. I mean, don't like limit yourself or pigeonhole yourself or think I could never do that. Because it's just you learn and you grow. And I think your perception of yourself changes, over time. So I think the sky's the limit. And I guess I would also kind of say to myself, you know, don't take things so seriously. Like I can remember like making a little mistake at work or something and just being like devastated. And I feel like I wasted a lot of time on trying to be like perfectionism. You know what I mean? Trying to be perfect and like and you realize over time that, you know, you're doing fine. You just like but in most instances you're going to do fine and if you work hard and apply yourself and you view those mistakes or missteps or failures as growth opportunities, then you're much more open-minded and it's not like, oh, I messed up, I got to quit, I've just got to go home and hide under my bed. It's just another thing that you can correct to the best of your ability and just move forward, and you won't do it again because it will be kind of in your mind, right? So yeah, I think just moving forward with a growth mindset where, you know, failures or mistakes are just to be learned from, and it's just another day and you do the best you can and move on, and don't take yourself too seriously. So, and be forgiving of yourself and others, I would say.
yeah,
Yeah.
good advice. Well, thanks for talking with me, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to do it. Thanks for asking me.